Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. We're going to start with this news from marijuana moment, as Arizona nears $1 billion in legal cannabis sales for 2022. Pretty impressive considering they launched their adult use market on January 21st, 2021, I believe. This did not take long. So this comes firstly from Arizona Mirror, written by Dave Abbott. Arizona's cannabis marketplace suffered a loss of nearly $7 million in August from July as both medical cannabis and adult use sales dropped about $3.5 million from each of the previous months. But typically we see July as like a peak sales month in the summer, coming down a bit before jumping back up in December as people stock up for the holidays. And this is according to the most recent report from the ADR. And the losses were offset though as ADOR, the Arizona Department of Revenue, revised July's totals upwards by almost $7 million. So it seems like July actually had $7 million more than what they thought. But despite the overall reduction, total cannabis sales passed the $908 million mark for the first 8 months of 2022 and will likely approach, if not eclipse, 2021's $1.4 billion before the year end. So love to see that. Very impressive. So you can pause to read for a bit more information on the breakdown of how those sales went through. But just to highlight, total tax revenues for medical and rec sales for August were weighed in at about $20.5 million, with about $11.9 million from the 16% cannabis excise tax imposed on rec sales. So again, highlighting that ending cannabis prohibition does bring jobs to the citizens in your state and brings in tax revenue that can go to schools, infrastructure, and many other things that states need tax revenue for. July numbers were revised upwards to a total of about $21.8 million. With about $12.5 million from the excise tax. And so let this be a reminder that reform does work, and it's a much smarter way to collect taxes from your citizens by creating a legal, safer alternative that they'd already be buying anyways from the illicit market. Now you're just bringing them to the legal market. It's a much smarter way to tax people and actually use that money effectively than the hidden tax that is inflation, printing a shit ton of money, giving handouts, and then making everybody's spending power suffer. And so obviously, politicians don't give a shit, but that is the reality of ending cannabis prohibition. So love to see Arizona crushing it. On to this one from Illinois. I feel like I got this from the future already because it's only October 2nd. And I'm going to publish this on October 2nd, although this was apparently updated tomorrow. But we've got Illinois' adult use cannabis monthly sales figures in for the month of September. Unfortunately, sales did bounce back to surpass August figures in all categories, as items sold jumped up to 3,092,000. In-state resident sales jumped up from 88.3 million to 89.5 million. Out-of-state resident sales, meaning all those that live around Illinois that don't have the luxury of adult use cannabis yet, they go to Illinois and give Illinois their tax dollars because their states are slow to act, went up from 41,132,000 to 41,184,000 for total sales in September of 130,685,122, up from 129,441,315. Which we love to see, highlighting that demand is still strong despite the fact that Illinois has been stuck at just 110 adult use dispensaries for the last year and a half. Now, fortunately, in early 2023, we're anticipating that they will hand out those extra 185 licenses and allow an extra 185 dispensaries, bringing the total up in Illinois to 295 legal sales outlets, which are going to help drive sales at least in 2023 and beyond. And so while we've unfortunately been stuck at 110 dispensaries, if you go through total sales, pretty impressive to see that the growth continues to head in the right direction. And the main months that we have to look out for sales spurts are March and April, then again in the summer in July, and then December. So we'll be looking out, but love to see this from Illinois. And so as we move on, we did get some news this week that, we haven't heard before, but does make us optimistic that this time could be different. So again, plan accordingly for your own situation, take it with a grain of salt. But Kyle Yeager from Marijuana Moment highlights a classic reprise. Schumer says lawmakers are very close to advancing SAFE Plus after work with a bunch of Republican senators. Now, this is annoying because we've heard this for the last 18 months. We know SAFE has had the votes to pass. It's ultimately just Schumer playing politics. And so this is a story from Marijuana Moment. More on that below if you wanted to check it out. But just going to cut straight to the sources. This is the clip, apparently in a debate where Schumer brought this up. So thanks MJ Stock Trader for sharing this. Here's the video of Sen Schumer addressing safe banking in a recent debate. And so again, he's used this talking point in the past. We were fooled before, we're not going to be fooled now. And just like MJ Stock Trader highlights, I want to believe him 100%, but his words have been meaningless in the past. And if we look at actions, Schumer has not acted on any of the campaign promises he's made, especially towards anyone in the cannabis industry. But just going to highlight what he says here, and we'll have to wait and see if this time is different, especially since the Dems are likely going to be voted out in a red wave, and that's going to probably force their hand to act from now until January 20th when the new party takes over, and that is the lame duck session when we're anticipating something. Now, again, we don't know, plan accordingly for a situation, but we've never been this close, and it's never been this important for him to pass safe policy. Main reasons I'll show you in the next few stories.
We are getting very close. I am working in a bipartisan way with Democrats and Republicans to take the Safe Banking Act, which allows financial institutions
Believe it when I see it.
Involve themselves in cannabis companies and lend money to them. But it also does some things for justice, such as expunging a record. You know, when a 15-year-old kid was caught with a small amount of marijuana.
And he uses the same talking points from last year. It's like, wow, this guy has no new material. He just, has his web set on a few different things, and he'll just use that talking point for years. It's pitiful at this point watching, realizing, like, how did I believe this guy? He's not a very good talker either, looking back in hindsight. But anyway.
And got a sentence that was the same as having a whole lot of heroin and selling it.
A whole lot of
heroin. Was moved. So expunging the records is important, and we're getting closer. We may be able to get something done rather soon. I'm working with a bunch of Republican senators, a bunch of Democratic senators to get something passed.
Are you really? Well, we hope you're not lying to us again, Chuck, or Schmuck, I should say, because we wouldn't be surprised. And he said in the past that he's been working with Republicans, and we found out that he's only been talking to two. So again, take this with a grain of salt, but we'd rather hear Schumer reiterating this and spreading this awareness than not. So just sharing what he said. But with that, why should SAFE pass? Because when SAFE doesn't pass, the problem perpetuates. So thank you, Joe Greisler, for highlighting cannabis businesses in Washington have been reporting an increase in armed robberies since the beginning of the year, spurring calls for the industry to allow for safer banking options, including passage of the federal Safe Banking Act. And so while this is another story coming out, MJ Biz Daily, Washington State cannabis retailers report ongoing spat of robberies. I think in the summer I had highlighted that there had been 50 robberies in Washington State alone. And unfortunately, criminals are taking advantage of the situation when the Dems claim to be, for social justice, when at the same time they're enabling this criminality. So it's so infuriating. And coming in at number 4, we've got Schmuck E. Schumer, and it shows that all he needed was a measly $328,553 to throw America under the bus and keep working for big pharmaceutical companies, allowing the opioid epidemic to continue, as opposed to working for the will of the American people, which is his job. So it's very shameful, and we'll see if from now until Jan he has any ounce of integrity left, because he knows he's got the votes. So will he continue just pandering to get the votes, or will he actually act, hopefully, if we see a red wave and they get kicked out? That would be the best case scenario. But just to highlight while we're at it, 2020 top contributions. And while these might be the two most polarizing figures in the U.S. right now, we can see that one is a lot more compromised and influenced by lobbying money than the other. And all I got to say is that in hindsight, this is just my opinion, doesn't mean that I'm right, but in hindsight, looking back over the last few years, I would much rather have number 2 in power than have number 1 in power. That's all I can say. And so moving on to some state news, Syracuse.com highlighting that number 2 just loosened its cannabis testing requirements in a big way. And so this is huge for New York. So more on the story below. I'm just going to share some of the highlights of it. But the Office of Cannabis Management this afternoon eliminated its cannabis testing limits for bacteria, yeast, and mold. This after conditional cannabis growers voiced concern that the majority of them can't pass the strict rules required by the state and therefore wouldn't be able to get their product into store shelves to open the market. And so I don't know how much bacteria, yeast, or mold is necessarily allowed versus not allowed before we can say that it's harmful or not harmful. But clearly we can see that rules in place in New York originally were a little bit too strict. And so I think this is a big beneficial win, because obviously they wouldn't reduce the rules if the bacteria, yeast, and mold was actually harmful. They're obviously just making the rules less strict so that it's easier for the industry, which we've been waiting for New York to do for months, over months now. And so just wanted to share this story. More on it below if you wanted to check it out, but I consider this a positive for all the cultivators and growers in New York, as this is not going to lead to a bunch of wasted product, as obviously it could have led to had that change not happened. And so coming from Florida Politics, report medical cannabis patients' daily dose amounts at an all-time high. So love to see this out of Florida, highlighting not only has the number of patients qualifying for medical cannabis increased in the last year, daily dose amounts ordered have too, according to the Physician Certification Pattern Review 2023 annual report. Link in the description. I'll put it below this article if you wanted to pull it just to check it out, which shows 546 million ounces of smokable cannabis was certified for patients between July 1, 2021 and June 30th, 2022. Love to see the strong demand as more Floridians choose a safer, non-addictive alternative. And in all, there were 750,600 patients who qualified or were eligible for medical cannabis according to the report. This report was likely filed like a month back, whereas right now we're up to about 762,000 patients as week over week we continue to recruit new patients. But highlighting, that's a 25% increase in the number of qualified patients from the previous fiscal year. And we've seen this year over year, and so that is a lovely growth rate out of Florida, and that is mainly why we invest in Florida, or at least in MSOs in Florida, especially as we anticipate the legal adult use market coming on. And so just love to see those growth numbers, although they don't seem that big now and they're flying under the radar just because so few have already certified as medical patients. Like, think, only 763,000 out of 21 million Floridians. And so nonetheless, just highlighting so much growth potential. More here if you wanted to pause to read the breakdown of all the figures. Otherwise, you can grab that link below if you wanted to check it out. But happy to report that out of Florida. Well, we move on to this one from Mississippi. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this easy summary. As Mississippi medical cannabis sales are on track to begin in January. So love to share that, as there were delays in certain states in the South, especially Georgia, most unfortunately, but good to see that Mississippi is not going through those same struggles. The sales are expected to reach $265 million in the first year and $800 million by the fourth year. While these are likely very conservative estimates, let's hope that things can go well so that sooner than later in Mississippi they can realize cannabis is not the devil's lettuce, loosen some tight regulations, no doubt that they have, and give more people access to the safer, non-addictive alternative that they've needed for a long time. And so you can grab the link below and read more about the ins and outs of Mississippi if you're interested. Well, we got this one from New Jersey, so thank you, Joe Grausler, for sharing this NewJersey.com article. You can grab the link below if you want to check it out. But expungement clinics being held throughout New Jersey to help those with past weed convictions. We love to see it. And while a lot of onus has been put on the MSOs to try and help out, when it wasn't the MSOs that put people in jail unlawfully for cannabis, it was the states. And so the states should obviously be fixing their past wrongs for their idiotic policies that they put in place a long time ago. What I love to see out of this story is that it's not the state or MSOs, but it is the church. Calvary Missionary Baptist Church in Trenton helping an expungement clinic Saturday to help residents who want to clear their record of past cannabis convictions. And so while the church has been under a lot of heat because of the bad PR, rightfully so, over the last few decades, the best thing the church can do is get rid of their biases and start helping people out again and building that sense of community. That's why we had churches in the first place. That is what religion does when it's working effectively, and love to at least see it. Hopefully more churches can pick up from where this one did. And so last one from Tom Engel sharing, California Governor Gavin Newsom said it's critical that federal cannabis legalization allow our farmers to legally supply the rest of the nation. And the last thing I want is Governor Gavin Newsom having any sort of say in cannabis, especially outside of California. But what could this mean, as he did recently sign an interstate commerce bill? And so while we don't know what these recent comments mean, one interesting thing I've learned about California recently is that apparently they've gone from the 5th largest market GDP-wise in the world to the 4th largest market GDP-wise in the world. And from my understanding, this is off the dome, so I could be wrong, let me know in the comments, but I think it's US number 1, China number 2, Japan number 3, and then California by itself is number 4. And the fact that this man is running California, and this is the fakest smile I've ever seen, and this man is essentially the epitome of evil to me, it does just make me a little bit nervous, and it highlights why that market is so important, why I think it'd be the best interest to get this man out of power sooner than later. Now that's just my opinion, just highlighting what he recently said. We don't know what this means, but let me know in the comments if you have any idea what this could eventually lead to, or any better guess than I have. And so with that, a few articles from The Hill, a mainstream conservative outlet, at least sharing what is coming as recreational cannabis on the ballot in these states in November. And so we know the states, but just going to share a little snippet here, as of course we're anticipating it in South Dakota, North Dakota, Arkansas, Missouri, and Maryland. And while we would have had it in Oklahoma, unfortunately the prohibitionists did win a lawsuit there, but fortunately in Oklahoma they're going to have a special session vote on March 7th, 2023 to legalize adult use. And so while they lost out in November, they are going to get that win in March, no doubt, in Oklahoma, but we're going to see these 5 states help cannabis win another election, no doubt. And with that, also just sharing another one from The Hill, highlighting the chances as almost 2 in 3 support cannabis legalization in Maryland survey, highlighting it's going to be a big win in Maryland for cannabis. And so more on the poll released Monday found that about 63% of voters said they backed legalizing cannabis, while 25% said they opposed it and 12% were unsure, or essentially 12% could be adjoined to the 63%, as polls really do not indicate much, as people are dishonest in polls because they're dishonest to themselves. And so more on here if you wanted to grab the links, but just happy to share those as more mainstream outlets are getting this message out there. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this interesting visual from AGP on US Cannabis, various scenarios painting different pictures of the future of cannabis. And so this is from October 31st. And so while I don't think 3 and 4 are even possible, I think the most possible scenarios are 1 and 2. So plan accordingly for your own situation, as no one knows what the outcome is going to be. But personally, I think the best case scenario is number 2, as a red wave would kick the Dems out of power, forcing them to do something and save face and a shred of dignity while they still have power. And that's the perfect opportunity to pass safe in the lame duck session to get that win for the cannabis industry, and at the same time the win for the bankers who are backing safe and want it to pass, that also back the Republicans. And that's the perfect way for safe to get done, so that it's out of McConnell's way. McConnell can come back in and not have to worry about cannabis. And so a lot of moving parts in here, but I think that's the best case scenario. What do you think could be the best case scenario? Let me know in the comments. And so with that, moving on, this one from Jesse Redmond sharing what Cowen has to say, says, don't read too much into Schumer's comments yesterday. They continue to believe there's a 60% probability that safe passes in the lame duck. So again, lots of probabilities, no definitive answers, so plan accordingly and be cautious, but just wanted to share what we've got. And so cannabis policy, Senator Schumer's comments suggest SAFE Act still in play. today. And so you can pause to read from this snippet, and then I'll scroll down a little bit and you can pause to read the rest of our view. And so that comes from November 1st, 2022. Well, we've got some news from Trulieve. They'll be holding their third quarter 2022 results conference call on November 9th, 2022, after market at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, following the release of its third quarter 2022 financial results. So looking forward to see these next Friday, and hopefully Trulieve will be able to get back to being cash flow positive after integrating all those harvest assets. Hopefully it doesn't take too much longer. While Columbia Care is set to report the third quarter 2022 results on November 14th, 2022 as well, also after market close at 4:30 p.m. And so we're seeing more MSOs wanting to report after market as opposed to before market. We'll see if that means anything. And also, I forget offhand when Cresco is reporting. I believe it's November 10th. And so different day than Columbia Care, but hopefully there will be some update or some news of that deal closing between Columbia Care and Cresco Labs. We'll have to wait and see, but happy to share that these are coming in the next few weeks. While Air Wellness has announces 2 new retail locations in Florida and Levia availability in the state of Florida. It announces the opening of 2 new retail stores in Florida located at Daytona Beach and Lake Worth. So good to see Air Wellness continuing to expand in that very undervalued and underrated state, as well as the expansion of Levia water-soluble cannabis tinctures in its Florida retail menus. And so Air's new store in Daytona Beach and Lake Worth joined more than 50 other retail locations throughout the state, so they are making themselves known there. Throughout this robust retail footprint, like mentioned in the earlier article, Florida's rapidly growing community of more than 761,000 qualified patients have access to Air's growing menu of cannabis products. Just a little bit more on Levia. Their tinctures come in 3 unique offerings: the Indica Dream, the Hybrid Celebrate, and the Sativa Achieve. Featuring high bioavailability and 300 milligrams of THC per bottle, Levia tinctures are water-soluble, allowable for flexible dosing and easy mixing with water and other beverages based on consumer preferences. And so you can pause to read a little bit more about that from Air Wellness. While some more news, thank you Tom Engel for sharing. A new study indicates that cannabis legalization provides a protective factor against lung injuries in a 2019 outbreak. Interesting. Would never have known this, but thank you, Tom Engel and Marijuana Moment, for sharing this. As with consumers in states that ended prohibition being likely to obtain cannabis from legal sources, reducing the risk of contamination. No duh. So another, more data highlighting the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition and having safe legal products as opposed to untested and potentially dangerous illegal ones. And so more reason to reform laws. Hope more states will get on board. And so with that, Tom Engel sharing, new Leafly report finds that cannabis is the 6th most valuable crop in the U.S., with 13,297 active legal cannabis farms across the 15 states where regulated recreational sales are underway. Total adult use cannabis tonnage grew 24% from a year ago. And so obviously as more states reform their laws, do you think the total tonnage is going to continue to grow, or is it going to be reduced? Likely going to continue to grow as more states reform their laws, get their heads out of their asses, and realize the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition. So happy to share this from Leafly. But that whole article will be down below if you wanted to grab a link. 1, corn. 2, soybeans. 3, hay. 4, wheat. 5, cotton. And 6, the lovely protein-filled cannabis seed. And with that, sharing this one from the Times Union, mainly just an opinion piece, but a sensible opinion piece that should be spread through more mainstream outlets. Commentary: U.S. government must remove cannabis obstacles. I agree. And so while I've covered this for almost a year now, I'm not going to get into it, but thank you, Brian Murray, for having the courage to share this in the Times Union, and thank you, Times Union, for publishing it. So you can grab the link below if you wanted to read. Last few stories just to highlight. Out of Canada, flower is still #1 with consumers, even as innovative product types crowd store shelves. And so actually, I said this is out of Canada, but I don't know if this is Canada alone. I do believe it's Canada and US based on Headsets data, which is primarily North American, but does come from both. So not Canada, North America. Flower has lost some market share to other cannabis products in recent years, but consumers aren't replacing flower with concentrates, edibles, and vapes. And so just highlighting that flower is still the favorite for everybody in flower consumption, and total dollars spent in the category have increased, even as flower's market share has decreased, as people use a lot of different products, but flower remains the backbone of the industry. As I said a few years back, that I believed it will continue to be the backbone, just highlighting what we believed, and just happy to share that that is the case. And so more on some of the stats and data if you wanted to pause to read, or you can grab the link below, but just happy to share that flower remains king. Well, second to flower apparently is the gummy and edibles niche, as gummies dominate cannabis-infused edible sector, with 2 major players vying for the lead as well. So a bit more on data coming from Headset, as the more data that we can get, the more we can share and learn. Sales of cannabis-infused edibles nearly tripled from 2018 to 2022, increasing almost 535 million, to more than 1.4 billion in total sales, according to Seattle-based analytics company Headset, which tracks regulated cannabis markets. And so while that is huge, keep in mind, I think the US did 24 billion in cannabis sales last year, so it still makes up a tiny portion. I don't know how much drinks make up of that. I imagine it's not even close to edibles, but just highlighting that while drinks is a big talk among people in the industry, don't necessarily know if it's actually going to pan out that way. And it's going to need a lot of regulative changes and likely descheduling for drinks to actually take off, despite what certain industry leaders have been saying about drinks. And so with that, we've got a nice infographic about cannabinoid growth as more edibles are now including CBD, CBN, and CBG along with THC. And then we've got a little graphic of sales of edibles containing cannabinoids. And so I'm not going to go through the whole story, but you can grab a link below highlighting that flower remains king and gummies are in near second place. And so lastly, just wanted to share this. Czech Republic on the way to legalizing cannabis from 4 hours ago. So in the Czech Republic, hemp products like cannabis, hashish, and cannabis oil have been available in pharmacies for years. Interesting, I didn't actually know that. Prague is now planning full legalization for 2023 and wants to coordinate the steps with Berlin. And so quite a bit in this article talking about sort of the situation right now and then what they plan. But just going to scroll down to the bottom. As hoping to reduce risks. At the end of September 2022, the government in Prague commissioned Voboril to draw a law to legalize hemp. In March 2023, the drug commissioner is scheduled to present a first draft of the bill. And so that will be in March 2023, hopefully in 4 or 5 months from now. And the idea is that there will be licensed companies working under strict rules for the production and distribution of cannabis, the Czech drug commissioner explained. Dealers would have to apply for a state license. It is still unclear whether users will have to register. And so you can pause read for a bit more, but again, this is still very early. I will try to check back in on this in March 2023 if they file an actual bill. But on top of that, we just anticipate Germany, as that is going to be the leader and hopefully the first domino of most of these European countries. And so that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.